I'm Brittany Lewis with Forbes Breaking News. In landmark bipartisan Senate action on Wednesday, Republican Susan Collins and Democrat Joe Manchin unveiled legislation to overhaul, quote, archaic and ambiguous election laws. This move comes after former President Trump's legal team attempted to exploit unclear language in an 1887 law to keep him in power after the 2020 election. The Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act clarifies that the role of the vice president in certifying election results is, quote, solely ministerial, with no authority to, quote, solely determine, accept, reject, or otherwise adjudicate the outcome. Take a listen to Collins and Manchin's full Senate floor remarks.
I'm pleased to join my close friend and dear colleague, Senator Manchin, in introducing bipartisan legislation to reform the archaic and ambiguous Electoral Count Act of 1887, the important law that governs how Congress tallies each state's electoral votes for president and vice president. Mr. President, on January 6th of 2017, I was amused to learn that I had received one electoral vote for Vice President of the United States, an office for which I obviously was not a candidate. But on January 6, 2021, I realized that my unearned vote from 4 years earlier was really not funny at all. Rather, it was an indication of deep structural problems with our system of certifying and counting the electoral votes for president and vice president. These unfortunate flaws are codified in the 1887 Electoral Count Act. Mr. President, in 4 of the past 6 presidential elections, this process has been abused, with members of both parties raising frivolous objections to electoral votes. But it took the violent breach of the Capitol on January 6th of 2021 to really shine a spotlight on the urgent need for reform. Over the past several months, Senator Manchin and I have worked with a terrific bipartisan group of senators who are united in our determination to prevent the flaws in this 135-year-old law from being used to undermine future presidential elections. I want to express my gratitude to my friend Senator Manchin and to all the members of our bipartisan group for their hard work, their constructive work to craft this legislation. Specifically, I want to thank Senators Portman, Sinema, Romney, Shaheen, Murkowski, Warner, Tillis, Murphy, Capito, Cardin, Young, Coons, and Satz for their work over several months. I also want to thank Senators Klobuchar and Blunt, who head the Rules Committee, for their advice and counsel throughout this process, and Senator Lindsey Graham for his insights and for joining as a co-sponsor. The legislation that we're introducing, the Electoral Count Reform and Presidential Transition Improvement Act, will help ensure that electoral votes totaled by Congress accurately reflect each state's popular vote for president and vice president. Our bill includes a number of important reforms, but I want to highlight just a few. First, it reasserts that the constitutional role of the vice president in counting electoral votes is strictly and solely ministerial. The idea any vice president would have the power to unilaterally accept or reject or change or halt the electoral votes is antithetical to our Constitution and basic democratic principles. Second, our bill raises the threshold to lodge an objection to electors to at least 1/5 of the duly chosen and sworn members of the House of Representatives and the United States Senate. Currently, Mr. President, only a single member in both houses is required to object to an elector or a slate of electors. Third, our legislation will ensure that Congress can identify a single conclusive slate of electors by clearly identifying a single state official who is responsible for certifying a state's electors, requiring Congress to defer to the slate of electors submitted by a state pursuant to the judgment of state or federal courts, and providing agreed presidential candidates with an expedited judicial review of federal claims related to a state's certificate of electors. Let me be clear that this does not create a new cause of action. Instead, it will ensure prompt and efficient adjudication of disputes. To help promote the orderly transfer of power, our bill also includes clear guidelines for when eligible presidential candidates may receive federal resources to support their transition into office. And I want to particularly thank Senators Portman, Coons, and Sass for their hard work on those provisions. Mr. President, we're also introducing a second bill, the Enhanced Election Security and Protection Act, to address other issues pertaining to the administration of elections. In the interest of time, let me just quickly note the major provisions of this bill. It would reauthorize the Election Assistance Commission for 5 years and require it to conduct additional cybersecurity testing of voting systems, a concept put forth by Senator Warren. It would improve the Postal Service's handling of election mail. It would enhance current penalties for violent threats against election workers and increase the maximum penalties for tampering with voting systems, including certain electronic records. That was the work of several members, including Senators Romney, Shaheen, and Sinema, among others. Mr. President, we have before us an historic opportunity to modernize and strengthen our system of certifying and counting the electoral votes for president and vice president. January 6th reminded us that nothing is more essential to the survival of a democracy than the orderly transfer of power. And there is nothing more essential to the orderly transfer of power than clear rules for effecting it. I very much hope that Congress will seize this opportunity to enact these sensible and much-needed reforms before the end of this Congress. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
The Senator from West Virginia.
While my dear friend's here, I wanted to tell her that, 6 months ago, we worked on this for 6 months. Started in January. And it was 14 senators that came at that time. We just started talking, and 14 senators, with all of your support, Mr. President, also. We had support from everybody saying something had to be done. But as delicate as this was, knowing that some might be thinking, well, we're picking on one side or the other, or supporting or defending one side or the other, there was only one thing we were concerned about. How do we defend this country and the Constitution and this wonderful capital that we have, so this can never happen again? January 6th is a black mark on the history of the United States of America. And if you want to erase it, you better do with what we did for 6 months, bringing people together to find a pathway forward. So that type of opportunity, if for some looking for an opportunity to degrade our government and our country and our form of governing ourselves, could never ever encourage them thinking they could do something here at this Capitol and disrupt us. Now, when that day happened, the thing I was most proud, we were all down in a secured room, and Senator Collins, remember. And it went on. We didn't know what the extent of this was going on. We knew one thing: they didn't come for a friendly visit. But we're down there talking, and all of a sudden, someone says, well, let's just conduct our business down here. Remember that? And to a T, everybody in that room says, no. They're not going to run us out of our body here. And we all came back here later that night and finished our business. What we did, and Senator Collins has led this admirably, is make sure that we're finishing our business. We're just starting it now to protect this democracy, this form of democracy that we have as a representative form, and the republic that we all are responsible for. And I'm just so proud to be part of it. And she's my dear friend. We worked many, many years together. We'll continue to. But I just want to thank you, Senator, for the hard work your staff. Our staffs work together. I'm very proud of all of our staffs, that they work together for the betterment of our country. So when people think that bipartisanship is not capable of happening in Washington, I want to say, watch. We've proved them wrong. We've done so many things together. We'll continue to. So again, I say thank you, and all those who participated, for just hanging in there. It took us 6 months to get here, but we've just begun.
Mr. President,
Senator from Maine.
I too want to salute and thank all of the members of our group who worked so hard over many months. As is always the case when you delve into a complicated issue, it turns out that there are far more nuances and complexities than you would think when you first look at the issue. But everyone continued to work for the common good, to strengthen the procedures, to update this archaic and ambiguous law that was written in the language of another era. And we have accomplished that. And I really hope our colleagues will all join together, and that in the end we can have an overwhelming vote. Finally, I too want to thank our staff members for their extraordinary work. They worked literally night and day to work through the many thorny issues and help bring us together. So my thanks not only to the members, but to their staffs as well. I yield the floor. Thank you, Mr. President.